Okay, welcome to Unit 11, Totalitarianism. This is probably one of my favorite units just because we get to talk about some really bad guys and see just how bad things get and how we as humans allowed that to happen. So let's just jump right on into it. So the time period that we're talking about here is going to be from the 1920s to the 1930s. There was a lot of stuff that was going on in the world at this point in time. So the Spanish flu was around from 1918 to 1919. It killed millions of people. It affected millions of people all over the world. So it hit India and England first in May of 1918, and it spread to the rest of Europe, Asia, Russia, and the United States by that fall. It was around for about a year, and it just mysteriously disappeared. There was never really a cure or a vaccine found. It just disappeared. So to kind of put this in perspective for you, there were 12 million people in India alone who died from the Spanish flu. So let's bring that down to a narrower scope. And look at the city of Berlin in Germany. 1,500 people a day were dying from the Spanish flu. And if you happen to be a fan of Downton Abbey, then you will remember that one of Matthew's love interests on there, his first fiance before Mary, anyway, she died of the Spanish flu as well. Okay, so that was a pretty big factor in and of itself. The second factor was Black Tuesday. I don't know if you can read the sign on the card, but it says $100 will buy this car, must pay cash, lost all on the stock market. October 29th, 1929 is the day that the U.S. stock market crashed, and this led us into a 12-year depression. And things started getting really bad for the American people. Many people were out of a job during the Great Depression, and of course, if you're out of a job, then you don't have money, and if you don't have money, then you can't pay your bills, and if you can't pay your bills, then you're probably going to get evicted from your house if you don't own it, as well as struggle to put food on the table, to clothe your children if you have them, that sort of thing. As you can see on the screen here, there were 30 million people that were unemployed worldwide. If you look at the picture on the left, it says unemployed, buy apples 5 cents each. This is a guy who has gone out, found some apples, and he's just trying to make a little bit of money in whatever way he can. So the top right picture is one of my favorite pictures. It says, jobless men keep going, we can't take care of our own. This sign was put up by the Chamber of Commerce in whatever city or town this photo was taken in. And what it is saying is that if you are here and looking for a job, just keep moving, keep going, because we can't even provide jobs for our own people. A lot of times men would jump on freight trains, and they would ride that freight train over a couple of cities or maybe even over a couple of states trying to find work. If they found a job, great. They'd stay there and work for a while. But oftentimes they wouldn't be able to find jobs, pretty much because everybody else was having a hard time staying employed during this time as well. The Maginot Line. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because I think it's really fascinating. So this is the Maginot Line. It's found in France. It was named after the French Minister of War, André Maginot. The soldiers back then, they considered it to be a pretty big advance in the way that they fortified and were able to secure their country's borders. It was made out of concrete and reinforced steel. Because it was made out of these heavier items, they were able to have heavier guns there and were able to protect their country a little bit better. It really was not that bad of a living situation if you were one of the soldiers stationed there. They had air conditioning, they had a recreation area, there were supply storehouses. They even had an underground rail system so that if they needed to get troops or supplies to a different part of the line, they could easily do that using the underground rail system that they had. It only covered the border between France and Germany. So this really solid red line here, this is the border between France and Germany for the most part. There's a little bit here that's not. But it only covered that little bit of area. It was about 200 miles long. You'll remember that France had already been invaded by the Germans twice. They were invaded by Germany during the Franco-Prussian War, and then they also were invaded again during World War I. So remember that the Germans had advanced on Paris, trying to take it over. The Battle of the Marne helped the French to defeat the Germans. So the French were afraid that Germany was going to try to invade them for a third time. And this is why they built the Maginot Line. If you look over on the map, the dotted lines here, all along up here, all these other dotted lines, this is also part of the Maginot Line, but it was not as strong as the part where it is the solid red. They probably had some barbed wire, maybe some fences as fortifications here, but as far as having the reinforced steel, concrete, that sort of fortification, it was definitely all along the border of Germany and France. It was effective until May of 1940, when Germany outflanked the Maginot Line and ended up invading Belgium to get to France anyway. There were also Irish nationalists. We've talked about nationalism a lot this year, and here is certainly a case where people want their independence. The Irish nationalists wanted independence from Great Britain. After World War I, there were Irish nationalists who won seats in British Parliament. But as a form of protest, these nationalist members ended up not attending Parliament. They weren't there to vote on important items. They were members of the Sinn Féin political party, which wasn't widely recognized. Nobody really acknowledged that it was a real political party. They ended up forming their own underground government. Then they all declared themselves completely independent from Great Britain. Their army, called the IRA, ended up attacking British officials in Ireland, and some of these attacks end up sparking a war between the nationalists in Ireland and the British government. This political tension also led to intensified religious differances. So Ireland ends up becoming split between Catholic Ireland and Protestant Northern Ireland. So on the map here, all of the area that is white, this would be this lower part and a little bit up here. All of this would be Catholic Ireland. And all of this area here in Northern Ireland, that would be Protestant Ireland. So Europe, if you remember from the map of Europe in 1921 from the last unit, there were some new countries that formed. We have Poland, that's new. We also have Romania, Yugoslavia, and Bulgaria. These are all new areas that on the map. So if you would please on your map, circle them, draw an arrow to them, label them, shade them in. That would be great. So what you need to remember about these areas is that these countries become military dictatorships. So they didn't have a president. They had a military leader who was in control of their country instead. All right, so I want you to take just a minute and think, what are some words, some adjectives that you would use to describe how people around the world must have been feeling at this point in the war? Take a minute and think about that.